So I elected to do my presentation on echolocation in dolphins. And naturally, if I was going to do it on dolphins, I wouldn't feature a dolphin on the title screen because that would be too predictable. So I found a whale. And so this begs the question, what is echolocation? I arrived on a basic definition. I think of it as using the reflection of sound to determine surroundings in a three-dimensional space. And a good way to demonstrate this, and keeping with the theme of the title slide, a presentation about dolphins that doesn't feature any dolphins. We've got a bat featured in this graphic, and as the bat is flying, and of course dolphins don't fly, so we'll just use a more all-encompassing term. As the bat is engaging in motility, it's emitting a noise at whatever frequency, it doesn't really matter. And depending on how much time has elapsed since that noise was emitted, as well as at what point each ear receives the sound waves in the form of an echo, the bat can determine information about its surroundings, distances, angles, all sorts of things. And it does this because if there is something out in the atmosphere, in the ether, because you got to think, the bat makes a noise. If there's nothing around it, then the noise or the sound waves just continue off out into the ether and dissipate into space. But in the event that there is something then out there, then the sound waves reflect back off of it. And so that's what you see in the green here. Let me use the laser pointer. That's what you see in the green here. So the bat is making noise. The sound waves bounce off of this object here, this prism, and then reflect back toward the bat. And depending on how they reflect, the bat can discern certain information about its surroundings. And so, where might this be beneficial? I hate to be the obvious one with the bat example, but caves. If you have a nocturnal animal where light isn't available and they don't have the rods and cones that are conducive to gathering more light, or they don't have any number of things, if they're not suited towards sight, or if certain conditions aren't conducive towards sight, then sometimes it's nice to have sensory organs subsidized with, or not subsidized, excuse me, supplemented with added senses. So the best way to think about this, because it's impractical to give an exhaustive definition when instead you can feel it working or hear it working, conceive it, you can perceive how it works. So I want you to close your eyes and then begin to click your tongue and slide your hand in front of your face. And as you click your tongue, when your hand is completely in front of your face, you know, at a distance of 6 or so inches, you'll hear it. And it's kind of unintuitive to try to describe how you hear it, but as your hand slides across the front of your face, even if you're talking and doing it, you can hear that something's there just because of the way that the sound reflects off and your ears receive it. And so this essentially is what echolocation boils down to. So, how do dolphins use echolocation? It's a sensory aid in low light or turbid conditions, and so turbid is just, not to use the chemistry definition, but occluded water or occluded liquid, where in whatever media, in this case, since we're speaking specifically with dolphins, if there's, I can't say red tide because then it would be in an anoxic environment and the dolphin would die anyway. Well, not actually, because they're mammals, so they breathe air. But In the event that there was a lot of silt in the water due to whatever current, they could use it, and that would help them determine information that they couldn't see otherwise. Or if it's a low light condition, if they're operating at a deeper depth where light doesn't penetrate quite as much, echolocation can help. And also hunting. Because you have to think the ocean is incredibly vast, and while it is filled and populated with wildlife, flora and fauna, for this instance, especially the fauna, you have to consider that because the ocean is so incredibly vast, at any given point there might not be something immediately in sight for a dolphin or just any predator, but in this case a dolphin to eat. So if the dolphin uses echolocation, it can send a high frequency pitch out into the ether, essentially, into the great beyond of the ocean, and if there's something out there, the dolphin will get an echo back, and it can discern information about it. So that's why a dolphin would use it. So how is echolocation in dolphins unique? The purpose of this, or the focus of this presentation, wasn't necessarily to compare and contrast dolphin echolocation from bat echolocation, but some degree, in order to think critically of how dolphin echolocation works and some of the consequences of its environment, is to compare it to its counterpart. And so we'll look at that a little bit. So dolphins exist under the water, bats exist above it, and so there's a fundamental difference between the media. We know that liquid is more dense. We know that air is less dense. They both exist in certain states of disorder, as all matter does, but I feel like the point is obvious that I'm trying to make, or at least I shouldn't get bogged down in trying to enumerate that. Liquid is more compact. The molecules are touching pretty much, I guess you could say, and in the air, the molecules aren't so bound together and don't confine themselves to a certain volume. And so as a result, in the water, sound translates, sound which operates through waves, transmits much faster, because instead of, in the air, you might have one particle going to another particle, and so this particle gets excited, or it gets excited by the wave, and then pushes into this one, and then this one goes. However, in water, you would have them rubbing up against each other, so this one gets excited, and then pushes into that one, and then that one, and then that one. So there's less dead space, so sound energy, sound waves translate much further through the water, and they transfer much quicker. Now, as a result of that, the wave transference, the differential wave transference between air and water, you have a couple different things that happen as a consequence. Distance and resolving power. So, as far as distance is concerned, you're losing, if you're in the water, you're losing less energy to particles covering dead space, and as a result, your sound waves can travel further distances, and so you can get data that's representative of a greater area, or volume in this case. However, with resolving power, because sound waves transmit so much faster through water, an aqueous media rather than a gaseous media, you have to consider that at a shorter distance, it would be increasingly hard to discern a relative distance between the animal, in this case a dolphin, emitting a noise and whatever is reflecting that noise back through echolocation. Because the sound just travels that much further, that much faster, by a factor of 4, I believe is what I read at one of the sources. I'll point it out in the references. But so you get greater distance as a dolphin as a consequence of being in a liquid media, but your resolving power at shorter distances is greatly diminished because your sound waves are traveling at a speed relative to what it would be in a gaseous media of 4 times greater. So naturally, we should ask what structures allow for this to occur. There's a handful of things going on, but it boils down to 3 main components: the melon, the acoustic window, and the phonic lips. Through some manipulation in the nasal cavity, the phonic lips, known as the monkey lips, vibrate, producing a high pitch, and the high pitch reverberates through the skeleton and into the melon. The melon acts to focus this sound energy and allow it to radiate outward. So time passes, it reflects against something out in the water. The sound waves come back to the dolphin, and there is something called the acoustic window in the posterior region of the mandible, which is another pocket, not dissimilar from the melon, also made of, or consisting of a similar lipid that will then reverberate and pass that data along to the brain for interpretation. And so that's pretty much how it happens. And so then we think about, why is it a lipid and not just some sort of an aqueous solution? There was an expert in the field whose name was Norris, and he conducted a handful of studies over the course of around 8 years. But this one stuck out for the purposes of enumerating why this lipid was important. And in this case, the lipids in dolphin melons approximate the impedance of seawater. And impedance essentially is analogous to the refractive indices of, or excuse me, the refractive index of some kind of a media. And if you've ever seen an example of someone putting a Pyrex bowl into vegetable oil and then filling the bowl with with more of said vegetable oil, you'll see that the bowl disappears. And this is because Pyrex and vegetable oil share the same refractive index. So essentially, to prevent distortion, the lipids inside the melon have a similar refractive index for sound, is the best way to put it. And so distortion is minimized, and there's no appreciable loss of sound waves, which is equivalent to data and perception. And that was from a study in 1974, they found that. So we go to references, and for my references, I've got information for both figures used. One is now in the public domain, and I've included a link to that. And another one was, there was no creator cited, but I did find it on whales.org, and I've included a link to that. The first real source that I used was WWL Owls, something that he published in 1993. It helped with fleshing out how it is that the acoustic window and the melon interrelate. And the second source from Norris and Harvey was explained on the last slide, slide 8. So thank you for listening to my presentation.